The highway stretched through Montana like a scar across winter skin. Snow fell in sheets so thick the world beyond 20 feet ceased to exist. It was the kind of weather that made driving feel less like transportation and more like faith, blind, necessary,
Hey there,
dangerous.
little ones.
Garrett Thorne kept both hands
Be
on the
safe
wheel of
now.
his F-150 posture straight, without effort. 40 years old, just over 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders but leaner than he used to be, the kind of lean that came from forgetting to eat rather than choosing not to. His dark hair was cut in a neat, undercut military discipline carved into muscle memory. The beard he wore now was short and precise silver, creeping in at the temples like frost on dark water. Blue-gray eyes watched the road with the practiced distance of a man who had learned the hard way that attention was the price of survival. He wore what he always wore when driving alone, a long-sleeved flannel shirt over a thermal undershirt, heavy canvas work pants, tan boots with treads worn smooth on the inside edge. No uniform anymore. No rank. No mission parameters. Just a man driving toward a town he had chosen because nothing ever seemed to happen there. The radio crackled with static and weather warnings. Garrett turned it off. He preferred silence. Silence did not ask questions. It did not require answers. Traffic moved slowly, bottlenecked by construction ahead. Orange cones materialized and vanished in the snow. Reflective vests glowed briefly before being swallowed by white. Garrett drove with the patience of someone who had nowhere urgent to be and no one waiting for his arrival. That was when he saw her. At first, she was just a shape near the median, barely visible through the curtain of falling snow. A dark silhouette against pale chaos. Garrett's foot eased off the accelerator without conscious thought. Old instincts stirred. His eyes narrowed, focusing through the weather the way they once focused through dust storms and smoke. The shape resolved into a dog. She sat upright near the rumble strip where the road widened slightly because of construction. Cars crawled past drivers, impatient, unaware. The dog did not flinch at the noise. She did not bark. She did not run. She simply sat, spine straight, head lifted. Garrett could see her clearly now. A German shepherd, full grown. Her coat was thick and weathered black and tan dulled by dirt in winter. She sat with her front paws pressed close together, almost touching. Not in some trained trick, but because exhaustion had taken her to the edge of collapse, and posture was all she had left to hold herself upright. Beside her, half tucked against the concrete barrier, sat a white foam box, the kind used for takeout or transporting fragile things. Inside it, barely visible, were three small shapes curled into one another. Puppies, only a few weeks old, their sides fluttered with shallow breaths. Garrett told himself to keep driving. He told himself it was dangerous to stop on a highway in a snowstorm. He told himself that someone else would see her, someone local, someone better equipped to help. The dog did not look at any of the other cars. She watched only him. Her eyes were a warm amber brown, steady and unsettling in their calm. There was no panic in them, no wild pleading. They held the quiet resolve of a creature that had already made every choice available to her and was now standing guard over the last one. Garrett had seen that look before. On human faces. In places where options ran out, and all that remained was the decision to endure or surrender. He passed her. The truck rolled forward another 30 yards before his chest tightened sharp and unexpected. His jaw clenched. His hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles went white. In the rearview mirror, the dog had not moved. She still sat exactly where he had seen her body squared to the road gaze, following the space where his truck had been. Garrett swore under his breath. He pulled onto the shoulder gravel, crunching beneath his tires. The engine ticked as it idled. The heater hummed. Outside, the wind pushed snow against the windshield in waves. Garrett sat for 3 full breaths. This was how it always started, he thought. One small decision, one deviation from the plan, one moment when survival instinct gave way to something older and less rational. He opened the door anyway. The cold hit him immediately. Montana winter at its worst. The kind of cold that found every gap in your clothing and pressed itself against your skin like a living thing. Garrett crossed the short distance to the dog with deliberate steps, keeping his posture relaxed, hands visible and empty. The German shepherd tracked his approach but did not bare her teeth. Up close, he could see how thin she was beneath the heavy coat, how her legs trembled with the effort of holding still. A faint groove circled her neck, the healed mark of a cord or rope pulled too tight for too long. "You did this on purpose," Garrett murmured. Not accusing, simply stating a fact. He crouched beside the foam box and peeled back the edge. The puppies were impossibly small eyes, barely open, fur still soft and uneven. They whimpered weakly at the intrusion, then pressed closer together for warmth. One was darker than the others, almost black. Another had restless paws that twitched in sleep. The third was quieter, with a pale smudge on her chest. Garrett shrugged out of his jacket without thinking. He wrapped the box carefully, tucking the fabric tight to hold in heat. When he lifted it, the weight was almost nothing. Fragile, breakable, dependent. The dog rose at once, fluid and controlled, despite her exhaustion. She stepped back to give him space, but her eyes never left the box. Garrett turned toward the truck. The dog followed without hesitation. When he opened the back door, she jumped in and sat down, posture straight, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. He paused, one hand on the door, struck by the certainty of not hope, expectation. As he climbed into the driver's seat, his eyes caught a dull glint at the dog's throat. A metal tag hung from a worn leather collar, its surface eaten by rust and weather. Only fragments of letters were still legible, etched deep enough to survive. A K and what might have been a 9 or a V. Garrett pulled back onto the highway. The heater worked to reclaim warmth. In the back seat, the German Shepherd did not lie down. She sat upright, eyes forward, every inch of her focused on staying present. The road stretched on. Pine trees gave way to open fields dusted with frost, then back to forest again. The snow fell lighter now, the storm beginning to exhaust itself. Garrett glanced at the rearview mirror. The dog was watching him, not with urgency, with assessment. She leaned forward slightly, her nose lifting. Then she pressed one paw against the back of his seat. The touch was gentle, intentional. Garrett's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Something crawled up his spine. The old familiar sensation. The tightening at the base of his skull. The awareness that had kept him alive in places where death came quietly and without warning. He pulled onto a turnout and shut off the engine. His heart beat harder than the situation warranted. He rested his forehead briefly against the wheel, breathing in, out, grounding himself the way he had learned to do years ago in rooms where panic could get you killed. When he looked up, the dog had not moved. Her paw rested where she had placed it, steady, warm through the fabric. "All right," Garrett said quietly. "I see you." He opened the door and stepped out, scanning the turnout and the tree line beyond. Nothing. No one. The world sat in winter silence, empty except for wind and falling snow. When he climbed back and the pressure between his shoulders eased, the dog withdrew her paw and settled back. Her job done. They drove the rest of the way without incident. By the time Garrett turned down the narrow road that led toward the edge of White Ridge, the sun had climbed higher. The light was pale and cold, sharpening every edge. He pulled into the gravel drive of a small rented house tucked against the forest. Simple, unremarkable. The kind of place chosen by people who did not want to be seen too clearly, or by those who wanted the world to feel farther away than it really was. He carried the foam box inside, moving carefully, setting it near the portable heater in the corner of the living room. The puppies stirred, small sounds filling the quiet space. The German Shepherd followed him in and stood just inside the doorway, watching him with unwavering attention. Garrett straightened and met her gaze. "You can stay," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "For now." The dog's ears flicked. She stepped fully into the house and lay down beside the box body, curved protectively around it. Garrett noticed then how her breathing slowed, how tension drained from her muscles inch by inch, as if she had been holding herself together on borrowed time and permission had finally arrived. He sank into a chair across from her, exhaustion settling over him like a heavy coat. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, a low, constant sound. Inside, 4 lives breathed in fragile unison. Garrett did not yet know the dog's name. He did not know why that single rusted letter on her collar felt like a warning. He only knew that for the first time in 6 months, something had cut through the numbness and demanded his attention, not with noise but with trust. And trust, he suspected, was how everything important began. The morning came clean and sharp. Garrett woke in the chair with a crick in his neck and the taste of stale coffee in his mouth. He had not meant to sleep there. He rarely meant to sleep anywhere these days. Sleep was a negotiation his body conducted without consulting his mind. The German Shepherd was already awake. She sat near the window, head lifted, observing the pale light filter through the trees. The puppies were pressed against her belly, nursing in that blind, desperate way newborns had. Survival without thought. Pure instinct. Garrett stood slowly, joints protesting. He was 40, not 70, but some mornings his body disagreed. He moved to the kitchen, started coffee, let routine carry him forward. Measure grounds, pour water. Wait for the machine to hiss and gurgle. While the coffee brewed, he crouched beside the dog and examined her more closely. The scar around her neck was old, but deep. Someone had kept her chained for a long time. The tag on her collar was worse for wear up close. The rust had eaten through most of the engraving, but he could make out more now in better light, K9 and a V and what might have been numbers. Military working dog, retired or discharged. Either way, she had a history that predated abandonment. Vesper, Garrett said aloud. The name arrived fully formed as if it had been waiting. Evening Star. Something that appeared when the light began to fail but refused to disappear entirely. The dog lifted her head. Amber eyes met his. She did not look away. Garrett nodded once. Agreement reached without negotiation. The puppies needed names too. Something simple. The smallest darker than the others he called Shadow. The one with restless paws became Scout. The third quieter with the pale smudge on her chest he named Luna. Vesper observed him through the entire process, head tilted slightly. Her expression unreadable, but attentive. By mid-morning, Garrett had made a decision. The dog and her puppies needed to see a veterinarian. Not because anything seemed immediately wrong, but because he had learned the hard way that waiting for problems to announce themselves was a luxury reserved for people who had never watched someone die from an infection that started small. He loaded Vesper and the puppies into the truck and with the same care he once used handling ordnance, stable, aware that fragile things required respect. The drive into White Ridge took 12 minutes. The town revealed itself in pieces. A diner with fogged windows. A hardware store with a hand-painted sign that had faded to the point of illegibility. A post office that looked older than the road that led to it. People glanced at his truck without interest, then looked again when they noticed the dog. Small towns had a way of cataloging strangers. Garrett had become good at being unremarkable. The veterinary clinic sat on the edge of town, clean but unpretentious. A simple sign, White Ridge Animal Care, Dr. Rebecca Lawson, DVM. The building was painted white with green trim, surrounded by a gravel parking lot and a small fenced area where dogs could stretch their legs before appointments. Garrett carried the box of puppies inside. Vesper walked beside him, close but not anxious. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and warm fur. A young woman at the front desk looked up, smiled automatically, then saw Vesper and paused. "Is she aggressive?" the receptionist asked, not unkindly. "Protocol, not fear." "No," Garrett said. "She's protective. There's a difference." The woman nodded and made a note. 10 minutes later, they were called back. Dr. Rebecca Lawson was in her late 50s, tall and spare, with silver blonde hair pulled into a low knot. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this work long enough that the motions had become instinct. Her eyes, however, were sharp. They missed very little. She greeted Garrett with professional warmth, then turned her attention to Vesper. The dog stood still, allowing the examination without resistance, but without relaxation either. Vigilance held like a second skin. "These are young," Dr. Lawson said after examining the puppies, her voice calm but focused. "Too young to be out in this weather. 4 weeks, maybe 5. They're underweight." She checked each puppy with methodical care, listened to hearts, examined eyes and ears, made notes on a clipboard. "They'll need supplemental feeding," she continued. "I'll give you formula and instructions. Keep them warm. Watch for lethargy or refusal to eat. Those are red flags." Garrett nodded. He had dealt with worse triage and worse conditions. This he could manage. Dr. Lawson moved to Vesper next. She ran her hands over the dog's body, checking for injuries, feeling for abnormalities. When she reached the scar around Vesper's neck, her fingers paused. Her brow creased. "This mark," she said, slowly looking up at Garrett. "I've seen this before, not on this dog specifically, but this pattern. It's from extended restraint. Years, not months." She examined the rusted tag, next turning it carefully in her fingers. "K9, Dr. Lawson read aloud. The number was too degraded to make out fully, but the V was clear. She looked at Garrett with an expression that had shifted from professional interest to something sharper. "This is a military working dog tag, or was, but she's not in the database. I checked when I saw the scar pattern. No civilian registry, no discharge paperwork filed locally." Garrett felt something tighten in his chest, not surprise, confirmation. "Someone erased her," Dr. Lawson said quietly. "Officially, this dog doesn't exist." Vesper sat through the conversation without moving, but her eyes tracked between Garrett and the veterinarian, as if following a discussion she could not hear, but understood nonetheless. Dr. Lawson stepped back, crossing her arms. "There's something else you should know. A woman called last week. Older, very worried. She was looking for a German shepherd matching this description. Said her son told her the dog had been hit by a car and died, but she didn't believe him. Did she leave a name? Garrett asked. Eleanor Ashford, lives on a farm north of town. I told her I'd keep an eye out. Garrett filed the name away. You didn't call her when I brought Vesper in? No, Dr. Lawson said, because I wanted to see what kind of person you were first. And because if a dog has been erased from official records, there's usually a reason. Sometimes that reason is benign. Sometimes it's not. She held his gaze for a moment, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a business card. She wrote a number on the back in precise handwriting. That's Eleanor's number. If you decide to contact her, tell her I sent you. If you don't, I'll understand. But these puppies deserve better than what they've had. And that dog, she nodded toward Vesper. She's been through something. I can see it in the way she moves, in the way she watches. She's not just protective. She's hypervigilant. That doesn't come from nothing. Garrett took the card. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Lawson said. Eleanor Ashford is a kind woman, but kindness doesn't always protect people from their own families. Back at the cabin, Garrett set the puppies near the heater and followed Dr. Lawson's instructions. Formula mixed to precise ratios, feeding every 3 hours, monitoring body temperature. It was methodical work, grounding in its simplicity. Vesper positioned herself so she could see both the door and Garrett. During the day, she followed him from room to room, never underfoot, always just far enough away to observe. At night, she lay beside the puppies but kept her head up, ears swiveling at every sound. Garrett recognized the behavior. He had lived it himself for years. The inability to fully rest. The constant scanning for threats. The way the body refused to believe that safety could be anything more than temporary. On the third evening, as the sun sank below the tree line and stained the snow amber and gold, Garrett sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor Ashford's phone number in front of him. He stared at it for a long time. He was not a man who sought out complications. He had come to Montana to disappear into quiet anonymity, to let the noise in his head settle into something manageable, to stop being a weapon and start being a person. But Vesper was curled around her puppies near the window, and her eyes were open, and she was watching him with an intensity that felt like a question. Garrett picked up his phone and dialed. The voice that answered was soft and cautious. Hello, Stuamo. Mrs. Ashford, my name is Garrett Thorne. Dr. Lawson gave me your number. I think I found your dog. There was a long pause, then a sound like air being let out of lungs that had been holding it too long. Is she alive? Eleanor Ashford asked, and her voice broke on the last word. She is, Garrett said. So are her puppies. Another pause, longer this time. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was steadier, but only just. Can I see her? Yes, Garrett said. When do you want to come? Now, Eleanor said. If that's not too much trouble. I've been looking for her for 8 days. I thought, her voice caught. I thought she was gone. Garrett gave her the address, hung up, looked at Vesper. Someone's coming, he said. Someone who's been looking for you. Vesper tilted her head. Then she stood, walked to the door, and sat down facing it, waiting. Eleanor Ashford arrived 32 minutes later. Garrett heard the car before he saw it. An old Subaru, pale blue, moving carefully over the gravel drive. He watched from the window as she parked and stepped out. She was short and spare, her posture slightly stooped but not defeated. Her hair was soft, silver gray, pulled back into a low bun. She wore a heavy olive wool coat buttoned to the throat, a cream scarf wrapped carefully around her neck, and sensible dark shoes dusted with dried salt from the road. Her hands were bare despite the cold fingers pale and trembling. Eleanor did not rush to the door. She stood beside her car for a moment, staring at the cabin as if gathering courage. Then she walked forward with the slow deliberation of someone who had learned that hope was fragile and could shatter with careless handling. Garrett opened the door before she knocked. Up close, Eleanor Ashford looked older than 73. Her face was lined with the kind of exhaustion that came not from age but from sustained worry. Her eyes were pale blue, delicate at first glance, sharp if you looked longer. When she saw Vesper sitting just inside the doorway, those eyes filled with tears. Oh, Eleanor whispered. Just that. One syllable carrying the weight of 8 days and all the fear that had filled them. Vesper stood. She walked to Eleanor slowly as if she too understood that this moment required care. Eleanor lowered herself to one knee, the motion stiff but practiced, and extended her hand, palm down. Vesper sniffed, then placed her nose gently against Eleanor's fingers. Eleanor exhaled shakily. She pressed her lips together, a soundless sob contained by will alone. She did not touch the puppies. She did not reach for the dog. She simply stayed there, breathing, as if proximity were enough for the moment. Garrett stepped back, giving them space. He had learned when to speak and when silence was the only thing appropriate. After a long moment, Eleanor rose. She turned to Garrett, wiping her eyes with the back of one hand. "Thank you," she said. The words sounded like they had been waiting a long time to be used. "I don't know how to—" She stopped, started again. "I thought my son was telling the truth. He said she'd been hit by a car, that she died quickly, that there was nothing to be done." "He lied," Garrett said, not a question. Eleanor nodded. "He took her a week ago, said she needed to see a vet. I believed him. I always believe him, even when I know better." She moved to the kitchen table, legs unsteady. Garrett gestured for her to sit. He poured coffee without asking if she wanted any. Black, simple. He set the cup in front of her. Eleanor wrapped both hands around it, absorbing warmth. "Her name is Vesper," Eleanor said quietly. "I've had her for 4 years. A neighbor was moving away and couldn't keep her. I took her in. She was already trained, already calm. I didn't ask too many questions. I should have." "Why did your son take her?" Garrett asked. Eleanor looked into her coffee cup as if the answer might be written in the dark liquid. "To hurt me," she said. "To make me understand that I don't have control anymore. That he does." She told the story slowly, carefully, as if each word cost something. Her husband William had died 5 years ago. Heart attack, sudden. He left her 200 acres of land and a farmhouse that had been in his family for 3 generations. Good land, timber, water rights, worth more than money could easily measure. Her son Nathaniel had been pushing her to sell for 2 years. He had reasons, good reasons, he said. She was getting older. The upkeep was too much. She would be better off in a smaller place closer to town where help was nearby. Eleanor had refused. "It's not about the land," she said. "It's about what he'll do with it. There's a company, Black Ridge Corporation. They've been buying up property around White Ridge, quietly, through intermediaries. Nathaniel works with them. He won't say how, but I know. A mother knows." She looked up at Garrett, her pale eyes sharp now, clear. "He thought if he took Vesper, if he made me believe she was dead, I would finally break. That I would sign the papers just to make the pain stop." Garrett said nothing. He understood leverage. He understood the precise application of pressure to create fractures. Eleanor drank her coffee in silence. Vesper came and sat beside her chair. Eleanor rested one hand on the dog's head, fingers trembling. "I don't know what to do," Eleanor said finally. "I want to take her home, but I'm afraid. Afraid that if I do, Nathaniel will come back. And next time he won't pretend she's dead. He'll make it true." Garrett leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He studied Eleanor Ashford the way he once studied terrain, looking for weak points, for strengths, for truth beneath the surface. "You can visit her here," he said, "every day if you want. But she stays with me until we know what your son is capable of, until we understand what's really happening." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Garrett glanced at Vesper. The dog was looking at him with those steady amber eyes unblinking. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I will." Eleanor stayed for an hour. She sat on the floor with Vesper and the puppies, speaking to them in soft tones Garrett could not quite hear. When she finally rose to leave, her movements were slower, as if exhaustion had finally caught up to grief. At the door, she turned back. "You should know," Eleanor said quietly, "my son doesn't like to lose, and he's not above using people to get what he wants. If he finds out you have Vesper—" "Let him find out," Garrett said. Eleanor studied his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, then walked to her car and drove away, taillights fading into the gathering dark. Garrett stood on the porch long after she left. The cold bit through his flannel shirt, but he did not move. He was thinking about leverage, about pressure, about men who used cruelty as a tool and expected no resistance. Vesper came and stood beside him. She did not press against his leg or demand attention. She simply stood there, solid and present. Garrett looked down at her. "We're in it now," he said. "You know that, right?" Vesper's tail moved once, a single deliberate wag. Garrett almost smiled. Inside, the puppies were sleeping. Outside, the forest was dark and silent. And somewhere in White Ridge, Nathaniel Ashford was making calculations that did not yet account for a man who had nothing left to lose and a dog who had already survived being erased once. The night settled, the cold deepened, and Garrett Thorne, for the first time in 6 months, felt something stir beneath the numbness. Purpose, quiet and unfamiliar, but undeniable. He went inside, locked the door, and sat in the chair by the window. Vesper lay at his feet. The puppies breathed their small, rhythmic breaths, and Garrett kept watch the way he always did, waiting for trouble to announce itself. It would come, it always did, but this time he would not be alone. The phone call came at 2 in the morning on the third night after Eleanor's visit. Garrett woke instantly, the way he always did, body moving from sleep to full alertness without transition. His hand found the phone on the table beside the chair where he had dozed off. Unknown number. He let it ring twice or more before answering. Mr. Thorne. The voice was male, middle-aged, calm in the way that required practice. Not a threat delivered hot, a statement delivered cold. You have something that belongs to the Ashford family. I'm calling to suggest you return it. Garrett said nothing. Silence was its own weapon. Let the other person fill the void. Mrs. Ashford is elderly, the voice continued. She's confused, sentimental about animals in a way that clouds her judgment. What she needs is family looking out for her interests. What she doesn't need is a stranger interfering in private matters. Who is this? Garrett asked, though he already knew. Nathaniel Ashford, Eleanor's son, the person legally responsible for her well-being. She seemed pretty clear-headed to me, Garrett said. A pause. When Nathaniel spoke again, the warmth had drained from his voice like water from a cracked basin. You're new to White Ridge, Mr. Thorne. You don't understand how things work here, how families operate. I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm trying to give you a chance to walk away from something that isn't your concern. And if I don't, then you'll learn that small towns have long memories and short patience for outsiders who don't know their place. The line went dead. Garrett set the phone down slowly. Across the room, Vesper was already on her feet, ears forward, body tense. She had not heard the conversation, but she had felt the shift in the air, the way danger changed the quality of silence. He knows, Garrett said to her, to himself, to the darkness, which means he's been watching. He moved to the window and looked out at the night. The forest was a wall of black beneath a sky scattered with stars. No headlights, no movement. But that meant nothing. Surveillance did not require visibility. It only required patience and the right equipment. Garrett pulled the curtains closed and checked the locks on both doors. Then he sat back down, but sleep was gone. His mind had already shifted into tactical mode, cataloging threats, calculating responses, mapping contingencies. Vesper returned to her place beside the puppies, but did not lie down. She sat upright, watching the door ready. They stayed that way until dawn. Morning brought coffee and the realization that Nathaniel Ashford's call had been a test. Push and see what pushes back. Measure resistance. Adjust strategy accordingly. Garrett had taken those kinds of tests before. He knew how they worked. The question was not whether trouble would escalate. The question was when and how. He fed the puppies, following Dr. Lawson's instructions with methodical precision. Shadow was growing faster than the others, more assertive at feeding time. Scout lived up to his name, constantly trying to climb out of the box. Luna remained the quietest, content to observe before acting. Vesper stood guard over them with the vigilance of a mother who had learned that safety was never guaranteed, only defended. At 9 in the morning, Garrett made a decision. If Nathaniel Ashford wanted to play games, Garrett needed to understand the board. And that meant finding someone who knew how the pieces moved. He loaded Vesper and the puppies into the truck and drove into town. Not to the veterinary clinic this time, to the small brick building on Main Street with a sign that read, White Ridge Herald, Eston, 1947. The newspaper office was exactly what Garrett expected. Cluttered, underfunded, stubbornly persistent, a front desk buried under stacks of papers, filing cabinets that looked older than the building itself, the smell of ink and old coffee, and something that might have been ambition once, but had settled into determination. A woman looked up from a computer screen as Garrett entered. Mid-30s, sharp features, short blonde hair that looked like it had been cut with impatience rather than style. She wore a denim jacket over a gray thermal shirt and jeans worn soft at the knees. Her eyes were green and missed very little. Help you, she asked. Not unfriendly, just busy. I'm looking for information, Garrett said, about land sales, specifically a company called Black Ridge Corporation. The woman's expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. You're the guy with the time, she said. It was not a question. Eleanor Ashford's dog. Word travels fast when old ladies start crying in coffee shops about miracles. Jillian Cross, Garrett guessed. Guilty. She stood and came around the desk extending a hand. Her grip was firm, brief, professional. You want to know about Black Ridge? That makes you either very smart or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet. Can we talk somewhere private? Garrett asked. Jillian studied him for a moment, then nodded toward a back office. Yeah, come on. The office was small and cramped, dominated by a desk covered in documents, maps, and coffee cups at various stages of abandonment. Jillian cleared a chair by moving a stack of folders to the floor, then sat behind the desk and gestured for Garrett to sit. Blackridge Corporation, she said without preamble, has been buying up land around White Ridge for the past 18 months, quietly, through shell companies and intermediaries. They target elderly landowners, isolated properties, places with water rights or mineral access. She pulled out a map and spread it across the desk. Red circles marked parcels all around White Ridge Valley. 15 of them. Each of these properties was purchased in the last year and a half, Jillian continued. All of them were owned by people over 70. All of them sold for prices that looked generous on paper, but were actually below market value once you factored in mineral rights and timber access. And here's the interesting part. She tapped the map. 6 of these former landowners are now in assisted living facilities. 3 more have moved out of state to live with family. The rest are dead. Garrett leaned forward, studying the map. The pattern was clear, systematic, ruthless in its efficiency. "What's Blackridge after?" he asked. Jillian pulled out another document, geological survey data, pages of technical, language, and mineral composition analysis. "Lithium," she said. "There's a massive deposit running beneath White Ridge Valley, estimated value somewhere north of $500 million. Maybe more. The kind of money that makes people forget about things like ethics and legality." She traced a line on the map. Eleanor Ashford's land sits right in the middle of the richest vein. Without her property, Blackridge can't consolidate the parcels they need for industrial-scale extraction. She's the keystone. Remove her, and the whole operation becomes viable. Garrett sat back processing. And Nathaniel Ashford works for Blackridge, not officially. He's listed as an independent real estate consultant. But I've tracked his financial disclosures. He's received at least 3 payments in the last year from subsidiaries connected to Blackridge, each one deposited within days of a successful land acquisition. Jillian leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Nathaniel Ashford is selling out his own mother for a commission, and if she won't cooperate, he'll find ways to make her life unbearable until she does. Taking her dog was just the opening move. "Who runs Blackridge?" Garrett asked. "That's where it gets murky," Jillian said. "The CEO is listed as Jay Blackwood, but there are no photos, no interviews, no public appearances. The address on file is a registered agent in Delaware. I've been trying to dig deeper, but I keep hitting walls. Whoever Jay Blackwood is, they're very good at staying invisible." Garrett thought about the phone call, about Nathaniel's confidence, about the surveillance that had to be happening for Nathaniel to know where Vesper was. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Jillian smiled. It was not a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for the right question. "Proof," she said. "Something concrete. Right now I have circumstantial evidence and pattern analysis. That's enough for an article, but not enough to stop them. If you can get me documentation, contracts, emails, recordings, anything that directly ties Nathaniel to Blackridge and shows intent to defraud or coerce his mother, I can break this story wide open. And if I can't, then Eleanor Ashford loses her land. Nathaniel gets rich, and Blackridge turns this valley into an open-pit mine. And in 10 years, White Ridge will be a ghost town with contaminated groundwater and a Superfund cleanup that never quite happens." Garrett stood. "I'll see what I can find." "One more thing," Jillian said as he reached the door. "Be careful. Blackridge has lawyers, expensive ones. And people who work for companies like that don't always stay on the legal side of problem solving. If they think you're a threat—" "I've dealt with threats before," Garrett said. Jillian looked at him with an expression that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Yeah," she said. "I bet you have." 3 days passed, quiet days that felt like held breath. Garrett established a routine. Feed the puppies, walk Vesper, maintain the cabin. Eleanor visited each afternoon, spending an hour with Vesper and the puppies, speaking to them in soft tones, bringing supplies she could not afford, but bought anyway. On the 4th day, Eleanor arrived with a key. "There's a house," she said, setting the key on Garrett's kitchen table. "About 2 miles from here, up on Hill Creek Road. It's empty. Has been for a couple years. I thought—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "I thought maybe you and Vesper would be safer there. More space. Better security." Garrett picked up the key. It was old brass, worn smooth with use. "Whose house?" he asked. Eleanor's hands twisted together. "It's complicated. It was supposed to be part of my husband's estate, but the paperwork got confused after he died. Nathaniel handled most of it. He said it would be better if—" She stopped, started again. I want you to have it, for as long as you need it. Eleanor, Garrett said gently, whose name is on the deed. She would not meet his eyes. I don't know, Nathaniel took care of it. Every instinct Garrett had was screaming warning. But Eleanor looked so tired, so desperate to help in the only way she knew how. So he took the key and said he would look at the house. That afternoon he drove to Hill Creek Road with Vesper in the passenger seat. The puppies stayed at the cabin, sleeping in their box by the heater. The house sat on a slight rise surrounded by pine trees. One story, well-maintained siding, a front porch with new railings. It looked like someone had renovated it recently. Garrett parked but did not get out immediately. He watched the house, studied the angles, looked for cameras for lines of sight for anything that felt wrong. Vesper remained in the truck, body rigid, ears back. She was staring at the house with an intensity that made Garrett's skin prickle. You don't like it, he said to her. Vesper growled, low, sustained, not directed at any visible threat, at the building itself. Garrett trusted that growl more than he trusted his own eyes. He got out slowly, leaving Vesper in the truck with the windows cracked. The air was cold and still. No birds, no wind, just silence pressing in from all sides. The front door opened easily with Eleanor's key. Inside, the house was clean, too clean. Furniture arranged with the precision of a staged showing. No dust, no signs of long-term vacancy. It smelled of fresh paint and something chemical. Air freshener maybe, or cleaning products used recently. Garrett moved through the house with tactical awareness. Kitchen, living room, 2 bedrooms, bathroom, everything neat, everything impersonal, like a hotel room trying to pretend it was a home. In the living room he stopped. His eyes tracked along the ceiling, the corners, the light fixtures. There, a small irregularity in the crown molding near the window. He pulled a chair over and examined it closely. Camera, pinhole lens, professional installation. Still active based on the faint LED indicator visible when he angled his head just right. Garrett did not touch it. He moved through the house again, this time knowing what to look for. He found 2 more, one in the vent above the kitchen sink, one mounted in the smoke detector in the master bedroom. This was not Eleanor's house. This was a trap. Surveillance disguised as charity. A way to monitor his movements, his routines, his vulnerabilities. Garrett left the house without disturbing anything. He locked the door and walked back to the truck, where Vesper waited, still staring at the building with focused distrust. Good girl, he said quietly. You were right. Back at the cabin, Garrett pulled up property records on his laptop. The house on Hill Creek Road had been purchased 6 months ago by Alpine Trust LLC, a shell company. He traced the ownership through 2 more layers of corporate obfuscation before hitting a wall. But the pattern was familiar. The same structure Jillian had described for other Black Ridge acquisitions. Nathaniel had offered his mother's house to Garrett. Eleanor genuinely believed she was helping, but Nathaniel had set it up as surveillance, which meant he was escalating, getting more aggressive, more willing to bend rules and ethics in service of whatever endgame he was pursuing. Garrett called Jillian, told her what he had found. She listened without interrupting, then swore quietly. They're documenting everything, she said, building a file. When they're ready to move, they'll have enough information to neutralize you as a threat. Blackmail, legal action, or worse. Worse, Garrett asked, though he already knew the answer. People have accidents, Jillian said, especially outsiders who don't know the terrain, especially in winter. That night, Garrett sat in the dark with Vesper at his feet and the puppies sleeping nearby. He was thinking about Eleanor, about the way Nathaniel had weaponized her kindness, used her love for Vesper as leverage to manipulate everyone involved. He was thinking about phone calls and surveillance cameras and threats delivered with polite voices. He was thinking about the difference between fighting for something and fighting against something, and how sometimes those were the same battle approached from different angles. The phone rang just after midnight. Garrett let it go to voicemail. When he played it back, Nathaniel's voice filled the cabin, calm and measured and utterly devoid of warmth. Mr. Thorne, I know you went to Hill Creek Road today. I know you found the cameras. That's fine. I wanted you to find them. I wanted you to understand that we're watching, that we know where you are and what you're doing. This is your last warning. Return the dog. Leave White Ridge. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Because if you stay, things are going to get very uncomfortable for you. And for my mother. Think about that. Think about whether one dog is worth destroying an old woman's peace. The message ended. Garrett deleted it, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. Vesper lifted her head and looked at him. In the dim light, her amber eyes seemed to glow. Garrett reached down and rested his hand on her head. Her fur was warm, solid, real. No, he said quietly. We're not leaving. Not yet. The next morning, Garrett drove back to the newspaper office. Jillian was at her desk, typing furiously, surrounded by empty coffee cups and documents that seemed to multiply while he watched. I need to know everything about Nathaniel Ashford, Garrett said without preamble. Not just his connection to Blackridge. Everything. Where he lives. Who he associates with. Debts, weaknesses, anything that gives us leverage. Jillian looked up, exhaustion written in the lines around her eyes. That's going to take time. How much time? A week, maybe less if I call in favors. You have 3 days, Garrett said. After that, I'm going to have to do something that will make quiet investigation impossible. Jillian studied him. What are you planning? I don't know yet, Garrett admitted, but Nathaniel is escalating, which means I need to either de-escalate or match him. And I'm not good at de-escalation. No, Jillian said, looking at him with something that might have been recognition. I don't imagine you are. She pulled out a notebook and started making a list. I'll prioritize financial records. That's usually where people like Nathaniel make mistakes. They get greedy, they get sloppy, and they leave trails. Garrett nodded and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Why are you helping? When he asked. This isn't your fight. Jillian stopped typing. She looked at him with an expression that was equal parts anger and determination. I grew up here, she said, White Ridge. My family has been here for 4 generations. I watched good people get pushed out by developers who promised progress and delivered nothing but strip malls and empty buildings. I watched the valley I loved get sold piece by piece to the highest bidder. So yeah, maybe it's not my fight in the sense that nobody's threatening me directly, but it's my home. And I'm tired of watching it get carved up by people who see nothing but dollar signs. She returned to her keyboard, fingers moving fast. Besides, she added without looking up, somebody needs to tell these stories. Might as well be me. Garrett left her there, working in her cluttered office, fighting her war with words and research and stubborn refusal to let the truth stay buried. On the drive back to the cabin, Vesper sat in the passenger seat and tracked the road with focused attention. Garrett glanced at her. This is going deeper than I expected, he said. You know that, right? This is going to get worse before it gets better. Vesper did not react. She simply maintained her vigil, steady and unwavering. When they arrived back at the cabin, something was wrong. Garrett felt it before he saw it. The air was too still. The forest too quiet. He parked 50 yards from the house and told Vesper to stay. She ignored him and jumped out anyway, moving low and fast toward the cabin. Garrett followed, every sense on high alert. The front door was intact, no signs of forced entry, but the window on the east side had been shattered. Glass scattered across the porch like ice. Inside, the cabin was untouched except for one thing. A rock the size of a fist sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by broken glass. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper secured with rubber bands. Garrett picked it up carefully and unfolded the note. 4 words printed in block letters: last warning, final chance. He set the note on the table. His jaw was tight. His hands were steady. The anger that rose in his chest was cold and controlled, the kind of anger that did not explode but calcified into purpose. Vesper circled the room once, then returned to the broken window. She stood there, staring out at the forest, body rigid. Garrett joined her. Together, they looked out at the trees, at the shadows, at the spaces where threats could hide and watch. All right, Garrett said quietly. You want to fight? Let's see how you handle someone who fights back. He pulled out his phone and called Jillian. Change of plans, he said when she answered. We're not waiting 3 days. We move now. What happened? Jillian asked. They threw a rock through my window, left a note. They're trying to intimidate me into leaving. And I don't intimidate easily, Garrett said. Get me everything you have on Nathaniel. Tonight. I don't care if it's incomplete. I don't care if it's not verified. I need ammunition, and I need it now. There was a pause. Then Jillian's voice came back, harder, now energized. Give me 6 hours. You have 4, Garrett said and hung up. He spent the rest of the afternoon securing the cabin, boarding up the broken window, moving the puppies to the interior bedroom where they would be safer, setting up his laptop in a position where he could work without being visible from outside. Eleanor came by at 3 in the afternoon, saw the broken window, and went pale. He's never done anything like this before, she whispered. Nathaniel, he's cruel, but he's never been violent. He's desperate, Garrett said. Desperation makes people cross lines they wouldn't normally cross. Eleanor sat down heavily in a kitchen chair. She looked older suddenly. fragile in a way she had not seemed before. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is my fault. I should never have involved you." "You didn't involve me, Rimini," Garrett said. "Vesper did, and I chose to stay. That's on me." He made Eleanor tea, sat with her while she drank it. Vesper lay at her feet, solid and grounding. "What are you going to do?" Eleanor asked finally. "Fight back," Garrett said. "The only way I know how." 4 hours later, as promised, Jillian arrived with a folder thick with documents. She spread them across Garrett's kitchen table, her eyes bright with the kind of energy that came from breaking through barriers. "Nathaniel Ashford is in debt," she said without preamble. "Deep. He owes $1.2 million to a casino in Reno. Been making payments for 3 years, but he's behind. 6 months behind, actually. That's why he's pushing so hard on the Blackridge deal. He needs the commission to keep from defaulting." She pulled out another document. "And here's the interesting part. Jay Blackwood isn't a mystery anymore. It's Janet Blackwood Hart, Nathaniel's ex-wife. They divorced 3 years ago, right around the time Blackridge started buying land. But the divorce was fake, a way to separate assets and avoid scrutiny. She's the brains. He's the local connection. Together, they've built a machine designed to extract maximum value from vulnerable people." Garrett studied the papers, bank statements, email printouts, photographs of Nathaniel and Janet together at restaurants, at corporate events, at locations that told a story of ongoing collaboration. "This is good," he said. "This is enough." "Enough for what?" Jillian asked. "To make him make a mistake," Garrett said. "To push him into doing something stupid and provable." He looked at Jillian. "Can you write the story, have it ready to publish on short notice?" "Already started," Jillian said. "But I need one more thing. I need Nathaniel on record, saying something incriminating, admitting to coercion or fraud or conspiracy, something that can't be explained away by lawyers." Garrett nodded slowly. A plan was forming, risky, potentially illegal. But warfare was rarely clean, and this had become a war the moment Nathaniel threw that rock. "I can get you that," Garrett said, "but you have to be ready to move fast once I do." "How fast?" "Hours, maybe less." Jillian gathered her papers, her expression serious. "Garrett, if this goes wrong, Blackridge will come after both of us with everything they have. Lawsuits, harassment, worse." "I know," Garrett said, "and you're okay with that." Garrett thought about Vesper sitting in the snow on the side of the highway, about Eleanor's trembling hands and tired eyes, about small towns being devoured by people who saw nothing but profit margins. "Yeah," he said, "I'm okay with it." After Jillian left, Garrett sat alone in the cabin with Vesper at his feet. The puppies were sleeping. The night was dark and cold outside, and somewhere in White Ridge, Nathaniel Ashford was making calculations that did not yet account for how far a man with nothing to lose would go to protect the fragile things that had been placed in his care. Garrett pulled out his phone and composed a text message to the number Nathaniel had called from. "We need to talk. Your mother's farm. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone." He hit send and waited. The response came 30 seconds later. "Fine, but bring the dog. This ends tomorrow, one way or another." Garrett set the phone down. He looked at Vesper, who was looking at him with those steady amber eyes. "Tomorrow," he said to her, "we find out what he's really capable of, and we make sure everyone knows." Vesper's tail moved once, not a wag, an acknowledgement. Outside, the wind picked up, moving through the pines with a sound like distant voices. And in the darkness, forces were gathering that would collide before the sun set again. The board was set, the pieces were moving, and Garrett Thorne, who had come to Montana to disappear, was about to discover that some fights found you no matter how far you ran. The morning came with a sky the color of old iron. Garrett woke before dawn as he always did, his body refusing the luxury of rest even when his mind craved it. The cabin was quiet except for the small sounds of the puppies stirring in their box and Vesper's steady breathing near the door. He made coffee, checked his equipment. The recording device was small, no larger than a USB drive, clipped to the inside of his jacket collar, where it would pick up audio without being visible. His phone was charged and set to record as backup. He had learned long ago that redundancy was the difference between success and failure. Vesper tracked his movements with focused attention. She did not pace or whine. She simply observed, conserving energy for whatever came next. At 10 in the morning, Eleanor called. "Nathaniel phoned me," she said, her voice tight with worry. "He said you two are meeting at the farm. Garrett, please be careful." He sounded different, angry in a way I haven't heard before. "I'll be careful," Garrett said. "But Eleanor, I need you to stay away from the farm today. No matter what you hear, No matter what anyone tells you, stay in town, stay visible, go to the diner, make sure people see you. Why, bye? Because if something goes wrong, I need you to have an alibi, Garrett said, and I need you safe. There was a long pause, then Eleanor's voice came back smaller, now frightened. What are you going to do? Get the truth, Garrett said, one way or another. He hung up before she could ask more questions. At 11, Garrett loaded Vesper into the truck. The puppies stayed behind, secured in the bedroom with food and water. But before they left, Vesper did something unexpected. She stood at the cabin door, then turned and walked deliberately toward the back bedroom. Not to check on the puppies, they were sleeping. She stopped at the closet where Garrett kept his old duffel bag, the one he had not opened since arriving in Montana, the one that held things he preferred not to think about. Vesper sat down in front of the closet and looked back at him, waiting. What is it? Garrett asked, though he felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the sensation that came before memories surfaced. He opened the closet. The duffel was military-issue worn canvas with his name still stenciled on the side. Thorne. G. He had not touched it in 6 months, had not wanted to. Vesper nosed the bag, insistent. Garrett crouched beside her and unzipped it slowly. Old uniforms, medals he never wore, a combat knife, and at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, a small wooden box. He did not remember packing this box. Did not remember it at all. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were photographs, old ones, Polaroids with dates written on the back in handwriting he recognized as his own, but could not remember writing. The first photo showed Garrett 8 years younger, 32, clean-shaven, wearing desert camouflage, kneeling beside a German Shepherd puppy with a white tag around her neck, K9V07. The second photo showed the same puppy, now a year old, sitting at attention, handler SSGT G Thorne written on the back. The third photo was both of them, Garrett's hand on the dog's head, the dog looking up at him with amber eyes. Trust, connection, love. The dates spanned 18 months, training, deployment, preparation, and then nothing. The photos stopped. Garrett's breath came short. His vision narrowed. This was not possible. He did not remember this dog, did not remember training her, did not remember, but Vesper pressed her nose against his hand. And suddenly fragments came rushing back. A facility in Virginia, a program with a name he was not supposed to speak. Dogs trained to detect deception through microexpressions and physiological changes. Classified work, dangerous work, work that had been shut down after something went wrong. He remembered now, remembered being told the program was terminated, remembered being debriefed, remembered signing documents, remembered a medical procedure. Routine, they said, standard memory suppression for classified programs. They had erased her from his mind, erased 18 months of his life, made him forget the dog he had trained, the dog he had loved. Vesper, he whispered, and the name felt different now. Not something he had chosen randomly, something he had always known, something buried. She had not forgotten him, even after 8 years, even after abandonment and abuse and being left for dead on a highway. She had recognized him, had known he would stop, had waited for him specifically, because she remembered what he had been forced to forget. Garrett sat on the floor of the cabin, photographs scattered around him, and wept. Not from grief, from recognition, from the sudden understanding that the moment on the highway had not been chance. It had been reunion. Vesper lay down beside him, her body pressed against his, patient, forgiving, waiting for him to remember what she had never forgotten. I'm sorry, Garrett said into her furrow. I'm so sorry I didn't remember. I'm sorry I left you. But Vesper did not need his apology. She needed his presence, and that finally he could give her. They sat together for a long time. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of Garrett's breathing slowly returning to normal. The puppies slept. The morning light grew stronger. When Garrett finally stood, he felt different, lighter, as if a weight he had not known he was carrying had been lifted. He looked at Vesper. She looked back, and in that gaze was everything that needed to be said. Forgiveness, loyalty, love that had survived erasure and time and every attempt to destroy it. All right, Garrett said quietly. Now we go finish this. Together, the way we always should have. Vesper's tail wagged once. Agreement. Resolution. They left the cabin together, handler and canine, reunited after 8 years, ready to face whatever came next. Not as strangers bound by circumstance, but as partners who had found each other again against impossible odds. The photographs remained on the floor, proof of a bond that bureaucracy and chemicals and time had tried to erase but could not, because some connections ran deeper than memory. Some loyalties could not be unmade. And as they drove toward Eleanor's farm, Garrett understood now why Vesper had led him to every piece of evidence, why she had known exactly where to look, why she had trusted him completely from the first moment. She had been searching for him for 8 years, waiting for the moment when he would see her again and remember. And on that snowy highway, she had finally found him. This was not a rescue. This was a reunion. And everything that came after was them reclaiming what had been stolen. Not just from Vesper, from both of them. The drive to Eleanor's farm took 15 minutes. The property sat at the end of a gravel road that wound through forest before opening into cleared land. 200 acres, timber on the north side, open pasture in the center. The farmhouse itself was old but well-maintained, white clapboard, with a green metal roof and a wraparound porch that had seen better days. Garrett parked 50 yards from the house and scanned the area. Nathaniel's Tesla was already there, pulled up close to the porch, its black paint gleaming despite the overcast sky. No other vehicles, no signs of additional people. Vesper tensed in the passenger seat, her body going rigid. "Easy," Garrett said quietly. "We do this smart. We get him talking. We get what we need. Then we leave." He clipped a leash to Vesper's collar. Not because he thought she would run, but because it gave him a reason to keep her close, to maintain physical connection. They approached the house together, boots crunching on gravel, breath fogging in the cold air. Nathaniel stepped out onto the porch before they reached the steps. He was exactly as Eleanor had described him. Tall, well-groomed, dark hair styled with precision. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a black turtleneck and dark slacks. Expensive shoes that had no business on a farm. His face had the angular lines of someone who had been handsome once and still traded on it, though age and stress were beginning to show around the eyes and mouth. "Mr. Thorne," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying the forced warmth of a salesman. "Thank you for coming, and you brought Vesper. Good. That makes this easier." Garrett stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Vesper positioned herself slightly in front of him, not aggressive, but clearly establishing a boundary. "Your mother's been looking for this dog," Garrett said. "You told her Vesper was dead." Nathaniel's smile tightened. "I told her what she needed to hear. My mother has a tendency to get attached to things that aren't good for her. Animals, property, outdated ideas about family legacy. Someone has to make the hard decisions. Hard decisions like abandoning a dog and her puppies on the side of a highway in winter." "I didn't abandon them," Nathaniel said, descending the porch steps slowly, hands in his coat pockets. "I relocated them. There's a difference. They were a distraction. My mother needs to focus on practical matters, like her future, like her health, like the very generous offer Black Ridge Corporation has made for this property." "She doesn't want to sell," Garrett said. "She doesn't know what she wants," Nathaniel replied. "She's 73 years old. She can't maintain this land. She can't afford the upkeep. She's being stubborn for the sake of stubbornness, and it's going to cost her everything." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that Garrett could see the calculation in his eyes. The assessment, the way Nathaniel was trying to determine whether Garrett was a threat or merely an inconvenience. "I'm prepared to make this worth your while," Nathaniel continued. "Return the dog. Walk away. I'll give you $10,000. Cash. No questions asked. You can disappear back to wherever you came from and forget White Ridge exists." "I'm not interested in your money," Garrett said. Nathaniel's expression shifted. The salesman's warmth drained away, replaced by something colder and more honest. "Then you're a fool," he said flatly, "because this doesn't end well for you if you keep interfering. I've been patient, I've been reasonable, but my patience has limits." "Is that a threat?" Garrett asked, making sure his voice was clear, that the recording device would pick up every word. "It's a statement of fact," Nathaniel said. "You're new here, you don't have roots, you don't have connections. If something unfortunate were to happen to you, nobody would ask too many questions. Accidents happen all the time in rural Montana, especially in winter, especially to outsiders who don't know the terrain." Vesper's lip curled back, showing teeth. A low growl vibrated in her chest. Nathaniel glanced at the dog, his eyes narrowing. "You should control your animal, Mr. Thorne. Aggressive dogs have a way of getting meow shot around here." That was when Garrett knew Nathaniel was not just desperate, he was dangerous. The mask had come off, completely revealing the man underneath. Someone who would threaten violence casually, who would speak of murder as if it were weather. "Why do you need your mother's land so badly?" Garrett asked, changing tactics. Blackridge has bought 15 other properties. Why is Eleanor so important? Nathaniel smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Because Eleanor's land sits on top of the richest lithium deposit in the valley, he said. Without it, the entire extraction operation is compromised. With it, Blackridge can consolidate and begin mining within 18 months. The commission on that deal is $20 million. My share is $3 million, enough to solve a lot of problems. Are problems like gambling debts? Garrett asked quietly. Nathaniel's smile vanished. His eyes went flat and hard. You've been digging, he said. That was stupid. That was very stupid. I know about Janet, Garrett continued, pressing now, going for the full confession. Your ex-wife who isn't really your ex-wife. The fake divorce, the shell companies, the systematic targeting of elderly landowners, the pressure tactics, all of it. Nathaniel took a step back, his hand moving to his coat pocket. When it emerged, he was holding a Glock 19. Compact, lethal, pointed directly at Garrett's chest. You know what your problem is, Thorne, Nathaniel said, his voice steady despite the gun. You think this is about right and wrong, about protecting some old woman and her dog, but it's not. It's about power, about who has it and who doesn't, and right now, I'm the one holding the gun. Vesper launched forward before Garrett could react. Not to attack, to intercept. She placed herself between Garrett and Nathaniel, body low, teeth bared, every muscle coiled and ready. Call off your D, Nathaniel said, taking another step back, the gun wavering slightly. Call her off or I'll shoot her. You shoot her and you lose your last chance to make this clean. Garrett said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Right now, you're just guilty of coercion and fraud. You pull that trigger, it's attempted murder. FBI gets involved. Everything you've built collapses. The FBI doesn't care about one dead dog and one dead drifter, Nathaniel said, but his hand was shaking now, doubt creeping in. Maybe not, Garrett agreed, but they care about corruption, about interstate fraud, about mining companies bribing officials and destroying communities. And right now, a reporter named Jillian Cross has enough evidence to bury you in Blackridge. The only question is whether you give her more ammunition or walk away while you still can. Nathaniel's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Garrett pulled his phone from his pocket slowly, deliberately. I can call her right now. Have her publish everything she has. Bank records, emails, photographs of you and Janet, documents showing the fake divorce and the shell companies. Or you can lower the gun, get in your car, and disappear before this gets worse. For a long moment, Nathaniel stood frozen. The gun still pointed, his fingers still on the trigger. The future balanced on the edge of a decision. Then Eleanor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Put the gun down, Nathaniel. Everyone turned. Eleanor stood at the corner of the house, leaning heavily on her cane, her face pale but her voice steady. Behind her, half hidden in shadow, was Jillian Cross with her camera raised, recording everything. Mom, Nathaniel said, and for the first time his voice cracked. What are you doing here? I live here, Eleanor said simply. This is my home, my land. And you're threatening to kill someone on my property because you're too weak to accept that you can't have what you want. You don't understand, Nathaniel said desperately. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to save you from losing everything. No, Eleanor said, walking forward slowly, each step deliberate. You're trying to save yourself, and you're using me as an excuse. She stopped a few feet from her son, looking up at him with eyes that held more disappointment than anger. Your father would be ashamed, she said quietly. I'm ashamed. Something broke in Nathaniel's face. The gun lowered, his shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked like what he was, a man who had made bad choices and run out of roads to travel. Then headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. Multiple vehicles, sheriff's department cruisers followed by an unmarked black SUV. Nathaniel looked at the approaching vehicles, then at Garrett, then at his mother. Realization dawned slowly. You set me up, he said. No, Garrett replied. You set yourself up. I just made sure someone was watching when you did. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Officers emerged, hands on holsters but not drawn. The driver of the SUV was a woman in her late 40s wearing a dark suit and an FBI badge on her belt. She approached with the calm confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Nathaniel Ashford, she said. I'm Special Agent Linda Vasquez, FBI. We need to talk about your business dealings with Blackridge Corporation, and I need you to put that weapon on the ground very slowly. Nathaniel looked at the gun in his hand as if surprised to find it there. He set it down carefully, then raised his hands. I want a lawyer, he said. Of course you do, Agent Vasquez replied. She nodded to the deputies who moved forward with handcuffs. As they secured, Nathaniel Vesper finally relaxed. She returned to Garrett's side, pressing against his leg. He rested his hand on her head, feeling the tension drain from both of them. Eleanor stood watching as they put her son in the back of a cruiser. Tears ran down her face, but she did not look away. She watched until the vehicles disappeared down the driveway, carrying Nathaniel toward consequences he had spent years trying to avoid. Then she turned to Garrett, and her voice when she spoke was small and broken. Thank you, she said, for not letting him become something worse than he already is. 3 months passed like water through cupped hands. Winter gave way to early spring. Snow melted into mud, then mud dried into earth that smelled of new growth and possibility. The FBI investigation moved with bureaucratic efficiency. Nathaniel was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and aggravated assault. His bail was set at $500,000, which he could not make. Janet Blackwood Hart was arrested in Delaware and extradited to Montana to face similar charges. The fake divorce was exposed. The shell companies were dissolved. Blackridge Corporation filed for bankruptcy within 6 weeks. 14 officers across 3 states were implicated in the scheme. Some took plea deals, others fought and lost. The justice system ground forward slow and imperfect, but ultimately functional. Jillian's article ran in the White Ridge Herald and was picked up by wire services. It won her a regional journalism award and job offers from larger papers. She turned them all down. Someone needs to stay and tell the rest of the story, she told Garrett when he asked why. The aftermath, the recovery, the part where people rebuild what was almost destroyed. Eleanor kept her land. The deed was cleared of all encumbrances. The pressure evaporated overnight. But the cost had been high. She had lost her son not to death, but to choices that could not be unmade. She grieved for him the way you grieve for someone who is still alive but no longer reachable. On a warm afternoon in early April, Eleanor came to Garrett's cabin with a proposal. The farmhouse is too big for one person, she said, sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of tea warming her hands. And you've been living in this cabin like you're camping instead of staying. I thought maybe we could make a different arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Garrett asked. Turn the farm into something useful, Eleanor said. A place for animals that have nowhere else to go, for people who need space to heal. You could run it, I'd help. We could call it Vesper House. She looked at Vesper, who lay by the door with Shadow Scout and Luna sprawled around her in various stages of sleep. It seems fitting, Eleanor continued. She brought us together. She saved herself by refusing to give up. Maybe we can help others do the same. Garrett considered the offer. He had come to Montana to disappear, to let the noise in his head settle into manageable silence. But in trying to disappear, he had found something he had not been looking for. Purpose that extended beyond himself. Connection that did not demand perfection. All right, he said, let's try it. The transformation took time. The farmhouse was cleaned and repaired. Outbuildings were converted into kennels and shelters. Fences were mended. Supplies were ordered. Word spread slowly through the valley about the place that took in strays and asked no questions. The first arrival was a woman in her late 20s with 2 young children and a black eye that was healing yellow at the edges. She had heard about Vesper House from a social worker who had heard about it from Jillian's follow-up articles. Eleanor welcomed her without hesitation, showed her to a room, fed her children, asked for nothing except the time she needed to figure out what came next. The woman stayed for 3 weeks. When she left, she had a job lined up and an apartment secured. She hugged Eleanor at the door and cried and promised to send pictures of the children. After she was gone, Eleanor sat on the porch with Garrett and watched the sunset over the valley. This is what the land was always meant for, she said quietly. Not mining, not profit. This. More people came, more animals. A rotating cast of broken things learning to be whole again. Garrett found himself settling into rhythms he had not experienced since before the military. Routines built around care instead of combat. Days measured in small victories instead of completed objectives. Vesper thrived. The puppies grew rapidly, developing personalities as distinct as their names. Shadow remained the quietest, thoughtful, and observant. Scout was bold and adventurous, constantly testing boundaries. Luna was the peacemaker, the one who seemed to sense when tension needed diffusing. At night, Garrett often sat on the porch of the farmhouse with Vesper beside him, looking out at land that felt less like a battlefield and more like home with each passing day. 6 months after Nathaniel's arrest, Garrett received a letter. It was from the Veterans Administration, forwarded through several addresses before finding him. Inside was a notification about a medical trial. New treatments for PTSD, therapies that were showing promise where traditional approaches had failed. He almost threw it away. Then he looked at Vesper, who was looking at him with those steady amber eyes, and he thought about second chances, about survival that extended beyond merely staying alive. He called the number on the letter and scheduled an appointment. The therapy was not easy. It required revisiting places in his mind he had spent years trying to seal off. But it was effective in ways medication and avoidance had never been. Slowly, incrementally, the noise in his head began to diminish. The hypervigilance that had defined him for so long started to relax its grip. He would never be who he was before war. That person was gone. But he could become someone new. Someone defined less by what he had survived and more by what he chose to protect. On a bright morning in late September, Garrett drove back to the stretch of Highway 93 where he had first seen Vesper. He parked in the same spot, turned off the engine, and sat for a long moment looking at the place where everything had changed. Vesper sat in the passenger seat, head tilted slightly, as if she too remembered. Garrett got out and walked to the spot where the foam box had sat. The median, the rumble strip, the concrete barrier. It all looked different in warm sunlight, less desperate, less dangerous. He knelt down and placed his hand on the ground, feeling the warmth of sun-heated asphalt. "You came back for me," he said quietly to Vesper, who had come to stand beside him. 8 years you waited. 8 years you remembered what I was forced to forget. And when you saw me again on this highway, you knew I would stop. Because deep down beneath the erasure, I still knew you too. He knelt down eye level with her. "I'm sorry I forgot. I'm sorry they made me forget. But I remember now. Every training session, every mission, every moment we were partners. And I'll never forget again." Vesper pressed her nose against his hand, not seeking comfort, offering it. They stayed there for a few minutes, two survivors acknowledging the moment when their paths had intersected and redirected. Then Garrett stood, brushed dirt from his jeans, and walked back to the truck. The drive back to Vesper House took 20 minutes. When he arrived, Eleanor was on the porch with a family who had just arrived. A father with tired eyes and two teenagers who looked like they had forgotten how to trust adults. Eleanor was speaking to them in her gentle way, explaining how things worked, asking nothing except that they stay as long as they needed. Garrett parked and climbed out. Shadow Scout and Luna came running from the barn tails, wagging bodies, wriggling with the uncomplicated joy of dogs who had never known abandonment. Vesper greeted them calmly. The matriarch returned. Jillian's car pulled up the driveway. She had taken to visiting regularly, documenting the project, writing follow-up stories about the people and animals who passed through Vesper House. She had become a friend in the way that people become friends, through shared purpose rather than shared history. That evening, as the sun set and turned the valley gold, everyone gathered on the porch. Eleanor in her rocking chair, Jillian with her notebook. The new family still uncertain but beginning to relax. Garrett leaning against the railing with Vesper at his feet and the puppies sprawled nearby. "Tell us how this started," one of the teenagers asked. A girl maybe 15 with the kind of wariness that came from learning too young that safety was conditional. Eleanor looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at Vesper. And then he told the story. Not the full story, not the parts about guns and threats and the FBI, just the essential truth. "I was driving through a storm," he said, "and I saw a dog sitting by the side of the road. She was waiting for someone to stop, someone to see her. And I almost didn't. I almost kept driving." "What made you stop?" the girl asked. Garrett thought about that question. About instinct and choice and the thousand small factors that combine to create a single moment of decision. "She did," he said, finally nodding toward Vesper. "She looked at me like she knew I would come back. Like she had faith in something I didn't have faith in myself. And I couldn't let that faith go unanswered." "What was she having faith in?" the girls asked. "That someone would do the right thing," Garrett said. "Even when it was hard, even when it was dangerous. That somewhere out there, someone still cared about protecting things that couldn't protect themselves." The girl absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Then she reached down slowly and placed her hand on Vesper's head. The dog accepted the touch with patient dignity. "I'm glad you stopped," the girl said quietly. "Me too," Garrett replied. As darkness settled over, the valley, lights began appearing in the farmhouse windows. Warm light, yellow against blue evening. Inside, Eleanor was preparing dinner. The kitchen smelled of bread and roasting vegetables. The father was helping, finding purpose in simple tasks. The boy was setting the table. Garrett remained on the porch a moment longer, breathing cold air that tasted of pine and wood smoke. Vesper stood and stretched, then walked to the door and looked back at him, waiting, patient, knowing he would follow. He did. Inside the house was warm and full of voices, not loud, not chaotic, just the gentle sound of people existing together in a space that asked nothing from them except presence. This was what Vesper House had become, not a sanctuary in the sense of permanent refuge, but a way station, a place where broken things could rest and remember how to move forward. Garrett found a seat at the table between Eleanor and Jillian. The new family sat across from them, still awkward, still uncertain, but beginning to understand that they were welcome without condition or judgment. They ate together. They talked about small things: weather, plans for the next day, the puppy's latest antics. Nothing profound, nothing that would make good copy for Jillian's articles or good stories for distant audiences. Just life, simple and honest, and harder won than most people would ever understand. After dinner, Garrett helped clean up while Eleanor showed the new family to their rooms. When the house finally settled into nighttime quiet, he walked out to the porch one last time. The stars were sharp and cold overhead. The forest was a dark mass against darker sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Another answered. Vesper came and sat beside him. They stayed there together, guardian and guardian, watching over what they had built from wreckage and refusal to surrender. "We did something good here," Garrett said to her. "Not perfect, not permanent, but good." Vesper leaned against his leg, agreement without words. In the morning there would be work to do, animals to feed, people to care for, the endless small tasks that constituted building something worth protecting. But for now, in this moment, Garrett allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in years. Peace, fragile and hard-won, but real. He had come to Montana to disappear. Instead, he had been found by a dog who refused to give up, by an old woman who chose trust over bitterness, by a community that needed reminding that good people still existed. And in being found, he had discovered what the veterans' counselors had tried to tell him for years: that healing was not about forgetting what you had been. It was about choosing what you would become. Garrett placed his hand on Vesper's head one last time, then stood and walked inside. Behind him, the door closed with a soft click. Ahead, the house waited warm and full of lives rebuilding themselves, one small choice at a time. This was the legacy of a moment on a highway, of a man who waited and a man who stopped, of faith answered and trust honored. Not perfect, not simple, but undeniably powerfully true. And in the morning when the sun rose over Vesper House, it would find them all still there, still working, still healing, still refusing to let the darkness win. Because sometimes that was enough, sometimes that was everything. The story did not end, it simply continued, one day, one choice, one act of care at a time. And in a world that often felt too broken to repair, that continuation was its own quiet miracle.